Hey everybody, and welcome back to another lecture with Coding with Roby. In today's lecture, we will be creating a virtual environment for our FastAPI application on a Windows machine. So the first thing you need to do is to click the Windows button along with CMD. This will open up your command prompt on a Windows machine. Once you open up your command prompt, you should see something similar to my screen. Let's now jump into our desktop where we will be creating the directory and project folder for this course. Once we are on our desktop, let's now create a new folder called FastAPI. We can make this new directory and folder by typing in mkdir FastAPI. And now I'm going to cd into our FastAPI folder that we just created. And now once we are inside this folder, I'm going to create our virtual environment. The first thing we need to do is to use piplist. Piplist will show us everything downloaded onto our machine with Python. So let's go ahead and see what we currently have installed. So the first thing we can notice is I have a bunch of things installed, but close to the bottom, I have VirtualEnv 20.2.2 version installed on my machine. If you do not have VirtualENV already installed on a machine, you can install it by typing in pip install VirtualENV. This will install VirtualENV onto your personal machine. Now the first thing you can notice is I have a whole bunch of requirements already satisfied, and that's because I already have VirtualENV installed on my machine. But on your side, if you do not have VirtualENV installed, you'll probably see a bunch of download links, which is what you're supposed to see as it's installing VirtualENV. And now from here, we're going to create our FastAPI virtual environment. And again, a virtual environment is a place where we can now run the application and keep the dependencies needed for a FastAPI completely separate from any other Python project you may have on your machine. So the way we can create an environment or a virtual environment is to say python-m venv FastAPI environment, like so. And with that, we now have our own FastAPI environment within our FastAPI project directory. However, our FastAPI environment is currently not running or is not activated. We can do that by cding or getting into our FastAPI environment directory, jumping into the scripts directory, and then activating the environment from there. Once you type in activate, you can see that the FastAPI environment is now activated because it is in the front of the terminal with parentheses saying that name. This means you are currently running inside that virtual environment. You can deactivate an environment by typing in deactivate. And once you type in deactivate, you can see that the parentheses in the environment or the virtual environment now is no longer in front of the terminal line. But for the rest of this course, we want to make sure that that FastAPI environment is activated. We now want to go back into our FastAPI directory. That is going to be the main directory for the entire project. Once inside here, we now want to install all of the dependencies for FastAPI. There are two main dependencies to install FastAPI. The first one is FastAPI, and we also need Uvicorn. Now, FastAPI has a single command to be able to install both of these dependencies. The way to do that is to type in pip install FastAPI, and then within brackets say all. When you type in all, that's going to install all dependencies for FastAPI. Once you click enter, you can see that it's downloading a bunch of things. This is all of the dependencies for FastAPI. You're installing all of the packages, you're setting up all of the install files, and everything is getting installed that you're going to need for FastAPI. Once the installation is complete, on my screen it's telling me that, hey, your pip version is out of date. There's a little newer version out, but if you get the same thing, it's usually not that big of an issue. So now I'm going to close out of my terminal. I'm going to say open on PyCharm. And once I click open, we can see that there's the desktop, and then inside desktop, I have FastAPI. Inside FastAPI, we have FastAPI environment with the scripts that we were using for activating and deactivating. But we want to open up the parent directory of FastAPI, the main project directory. Now from here, we can see that we have our directory open with our FastAPI environment, which is a library root with include, lib, scripts, our py.venv.cfg. These are just requirements for the virtual environment and can be ignored for right now. But let's go ahead and create our first FastAPI application. If we right click on the parent directory and say new Python file. From here we can create our first application. And I'm going to be calling it books because in our future lecture we're going to be using books as our first API and first project that we create. So we're going to create our first API in this books.py file, but then we're just going to remove it and then add it to our new project. So now you can see that we have the books.py. And once I have this file open, let's check our terminal to make sure we have FastAPI environment running, which we do currently already have the FastAPI environment running because it got carried over from our command prompt. However, if we cd into scripts, we can deactivate it or activate it based on our needs. I'm going to deactivate it just to show that we're able to deactivate it, and now I'm going to reactivate the environment. And now I'm going to type in CLS just to clear the terminal. So the first thing we need to do is to import FastAPI into our books.py file. We can do this by saying from FastAPI import FastAPI. And now we need to say app equals FastAPI. And now under this app variable, we're going to create our first function, which is going to be an API route. And this first API is going to be a RESTful API. This is a real RESTful API running on FastAPI, and this is just showing you the power of how quick FastAPI can work on your machine. The first thing we're going to need to do is make sure we call and create an asynchronous function. We can do that by typing in async, and I'm going to call our first function first API. And I'm going to return a dictionary where the key is message and the value is hello Eric. You can make it whatever you want, but I'm going to say message is hello Eric as a dictionary. Now we're going to need above the function a decorator, and this decorator is going to be app.get, where the path of the API URL is going to be. The first API we're going to create is a get to make this super simple, just so we can see the API running in action. And there we go. That is really all we need. So now let's jump back into our terminal, make sure the FastAPI environment is running, and also make sure we are in our FastAPI parent directory. So I'm going to cd back to our FastAPI directory. And from here, I'm going to type in unicorn space books :app -- reload. And immediately we can see that Unicorn is running on this path. And we'll want to open up this path. And we also can see that we says started reloader process, started server process, waiting for application startup, and now application startup complete. Now this books :app, we just need to make sure that this books is the file of the books that we created, and then :app, which is going to be this app, which is equal to FastAPI. Let's now open up this path. And when we open this path up, we can now see the message of Eric Roby as the response. This is our first RESTful API using FastAPI, where we are now receiving a dictionary of a message with hello Eric as the value. Super, super cool. So in the next video, we're going to expand on books.py and really dive into the power of FastAPI. And I'm excited to jump into this journey with you, and I will see you in the next video.